Peace, y'all. We made it. Today's edition. I want to talk about the covenant. The covenant. You know, when you hear, the covenant, off top, it makes you think of, like the Bible or in a religious, like sort of like a religious context with, with God and the chosen and being a chosen one. You hear that every day now lately, right? The chosen one. The covenant that I'm referring to is, the covenant with self, with you and self, in terms of self, the love for self. Now, when we dive into self-love, right? When I think of self-love, it's a commitment, it's an agreement, it's a contract, it's binding, all the above, right? With you and yourself, right? Self-love, self-care, right? When in the last video I spoke of, what's good for you versus what's not good for you. And if you can write them all down and draw the line down the middle, right? It tells you a lot about yourself. It tells you who you are, right? As an exercise, if we, wrote these things down just to see it on paper, right? Not spookism or not, something magically, nothing like that, but actually to see it, right? You can develop a better idea or a better understanding of what and who you are. For example, if hindsight's 2020, I can go back from this present moment and try, if I was able to travel back just for entertainment purposes, right, of who I am back 20, go back, let's say 20 years, right? And certain things based off of who I am today, and just, for sake of the conversation, I had that map or that audit of self, what's good for me versus what's not good for me, and all the choices made that brought me up to this present, right? Certain things I wouldn't entertain anymore, just by the covenant that was created that I have for myself in present moment, present day. I mean, we all have that. We all have that. If we had a time machine and you go back and you say, okay, me versus not having an agreement with myself, right? Me not having a standard, or me not having understanding or knowledge itself, right? Man, that situation that you found yourself in would be, it could be another way. It would have been on the other side of things, right? And this is just my experience with it, right? The covenant and the agreement with you and God is the covenant and agreement with you and self. Now, what's the difference between you and self? All right. When you see yourself, when you look in yourself in the mirror, if you look yourself in the mirror and you don't speak to the mirror and you look at yourself, say, yeah, I could tighten up this shape up. I need a shape up, or I would like to see my hair done a certain kind of way, right? And you're looking at an image, okay? Now, that image that you're looking in the mirror and see, that is not necessarily connected or identified with yourself. Yourself is the thought behind the image. Why do I need, the shape up? Or why do I want to see my hair done a certain kind of way, right? these thoughts and that conversation is coming from a different a different entity. That's coming from, that thought is coming from, in which the idea of what self is and what self is manifesting. So on one hand, we like to call the ego, right? The ego is more of a is happening in the physical, right? Versus the thought behind it. The thought behind it actually is ourself. Like, why today did you choose to have a jacket on, right? Had a meeting, had to be somewhere, and therefore you wanted to present yourself as, tidying up, not the same gear from leaving the gym, right? So those are not two different selves, but those are two different thoughts that went into the manifestation, or went into the present moment. One was demanding a not an entire different version, but it was a different it was a different part or different attribute of the same thought that goes into it. Along them lines. The point in the covenant with self and the self-love being the covenant is, how can I go and claim or make prayer or make ritual space, whether it's going to the church place or going to the mosque place or anything, and I call myself worshiping what I believe to be God, right? And haven't yet even expounded, or I want to say investigated, the covenant in which we have with ourselves. Okay, what difference does it make what shirt or what gown I wear to any one of those establishments if the gown and thought and sincerity at heart doesn't reflect that in which the covenant or the binding agreement that I have with myself? See, that's what God loves, in spirit. In spirit, not in its colloquial sense of, the man in the sky type thing, right? Certain feelings about yourself. Like, I'm not going to lie. If I was to take 20 year ago Drew, right, doing what 20-year ago Drew was doing, right? Today, the mix, once that conversation start, even going a certain way, I'll shut it down. I'll try to do it the best way possible, that aligns with, who my current version. Doesn't mean I have to be, it has to be any ill manneredness about it, right? But I'm shutting it down. Once the conversation start going too much to the left, right? And, in the familiarity, reminiscing on, I'll dead the conversation, because what I've established in the work that it took to get here is like, that's a negative pull, especially when dealing with self. We're dealing with two selves, higher version and the lower version. That's all we're dealing with. That's all we're dealing with at a time. And each moment in time, we're dealing with higher and the lower vibration of yourself. And what I want to say, and what version is going to take precedence at that moment. We don't own anything, outside of the moment. Outside of this moment here, right? We don't own it. Anything outside this moment, and it's applicable. You apply that to anything. Right now, this moment is where where I need to be. It deserves all your attention, all your highest vibration, all your all every spark plug is firing on what we're doing right here, right now. Because outside of this moment, it's like the attachment is to the now. Like that's why the present is the gift, right? Own now, in the process of it. So the like I love me to hurt me. I love me too much to hurt me. So I don't want to do anything or be involved with anything that is not good for me. And that's what the understanding. Who knows what 50 years of this would breed, right? But we didn't have haven't been privy to be here for 50 years. But once you have the understanding of it, like, yeah, okay, this self-covenant, this self-love thing, okay, this gotta be, I'm not that in which is on these things. That's not who I am. I know who I am, right? So that right there that they're doing here, that really doesn't do anything for me. But this right here is like, yeah, this makes me happy, I'm proud, I'm content with being in this vibration here. This is where I find, peace at. Be present in that. That you might not want to give that, you might not want to share that with give somebody the access to that. That's not worthy of it. You understand? Be it that place that you like to go. Myself, I like to get outside in nature. That was, when I experienced that, it was like, man, another thing. Like, man, if you can vibe with me, we can match frequencies in that space right there, and come on, let's do it, right? But if it's like, sort of like, you got to reach for it, or you trying to pull somebody into joy. Everybody's not meant to enjoy what you enjoy. Everybody's is not sent to enjoy you. And that it all revolves back to the covenant, right, between you and God. And the covenant between you and God is the covenant between you and yourself. And we went all the way around the mulberry bush to bring you there. The covenant between you and God is the covenant that you have with yourself. And it dictates everything surrounding what what you do in your leisure, how you are in the present. When it's your time and the time that you take in preparation of, whatever it is, what you take away from something, what you leave when you exit, right? The feeling going into the whole aura, surrounding you, and when you're doing what you're doing. It could be down to, when you're in the grocery shop, in conversation with a stranger, right? Everything goes into it the same way, and it's revolving around the covenant that you have with yourself. Because it's an unspoken language. It's a language that's picked up on, without being said, if you will. That's the covenant between you and God. You know what I mean? The covenant between you and yourself. Yeah. True indeed. Own the moment. The moment is all you got, man. The present is a gift. We know that. The moment is the only thing that you own. Right here, right now. The man that throws away, neglects the current moment, neglects and throws away all that he has. The present moment is the only thing that you own. Outside of this, you don't own it. If it in the past, you don't own it anymore. That's over with. If it hasn't occurred, we dealing with, we dealing with actual, actual facts. Right now, tomorrow is now. Yesterday is gone. We dealing in right now. Stay in the now. The beginning. And this is the day's edition, man. Yeah. Outside of, master the moment. Master the moment. Master the moment, man. I was on the thing yesterday, and I heard a brother say, I don't know what it was regards. It was a short, and he said he met a man, and the man had told him, when you don't feel like, I don't want to butcher it. I don't want to chop this. He said, when you don't think that you have any more left in the tank, just know that's not all you got. You have some more. Once you feel as though that you, it could be in the gym, and the reason why I say the gym, because I haven't gone yet, and that's next up. When you feel like you don't have one more, know that you got some more left. That's the trick. That's the trick. That's the lower self, or the devil, on your back saying, all right, we done. We you could take that whatever you need. So I know that spoke to me though. It's just like, you have more in the tank. Man, I said it pretty much the best way I could say. He said, once you think that you don't have any more left, you gotta believe, that it's more. You have more in the tank. We're limitless. You understand? There ain't the only limits that we have in front of us are the limits that we place on ourselves, right? And that covenant, that bond between you and God, that covenant, what I'm referring to between you and God is the covenant of self-love between you and yourself. Understand the difference. The covenant between you and God is the covenant between you and yourself. And with that being said, what that brother was saying when he said you don't feel like, when you feel like you don't have any more left, you don't have any more reps, across the board and whatever you're doing, yeah, it's something left in there. It's something left in the tank. You got more. You always have more, and that's because the covenant between you and self is connected to an unlimited source. See, the ego is limited to experiences that it had in the physical, and how it's, everything is relative to something else, right? So that in which, things are happening, one thing after another. And, we're faced with different things when it's right in front of you. See, the thought of something can fake you out, right? Not even seeing the thought of what something may feel like is fear-based, because until you felt it in the physical, you haven't experienced that yet. That's a fear. So we're dealing with life as it comes. And you understand, I said this a couple videos ago, right? And it's really a mantra of mine. Things aren't happening to you, they're happening for you. So with that being said, it's all relative to something else that's going on. It's how you're relating these events to, who you are in totality, and the covenant that you have with yourself. What did I learn from that situation? How have I grown since that situation? What am I doing? What has that taught me about myself in that situation? Yeah, man. Like that. The covenant, it's the covenant, that we have to, and you build the covenant. If you don't have one, you build it. Now, right? Like today now, stay in the now. The beginning. Who said, once you get the information, okay, boom, let's work on it. Let's get to work. Put in a little, make it, I'm going to use the word easy. Not that it's easy, but it's not hard. Make it easy for yourself. Do that little thing. Do that thing that you know that you should be doing because it's on your mind that you just keep not doing. Not even that you're putting it off for something else. Do that thing just a little bit. Do one of it. If it requires you to look into something, type up on this device before you get on the TikTok, before you get on the Instagram. Type up something about that thing that you're supposed to be doing. That's the day's work. It took you 5 minutes. And however long of time you spend on it, you do that once a day. And when you think about it, do it twice a day. And when you think more about it, do it 3 times a day. Just one thing, just learn something about it. And now you're owning the moment and you're in that motion. You're in that that's how progress and process works. And now you're processing data. And that's how we bridge the gap between, who we were to who we're becoming. Man. That covenant, man, between self, man, you and yourself. That's what God loved, man. That's what God loved. Hey, so happy to be here, man. I hope everybody has a truly wonderful, great everything. Peace.